welcome to 30 minutes of just complimenting the hell out of this thing, because I love it that much. It's amazing. Better than Series 9, better than the new series put together and rolled into a massive David Tennant ball with a Matt Smith head on top. I love this to pieces. It's amazing. Case closed. I'm going to get some tea. Hello YouTube, I'm on to another review. Today I'm doing something slightly different and taking a look at a product that actually is Big Finish related but isn't Doctor Who to an extent, and that is the best thing ever since sliced bread that I've been saying about many times now. Jago and Litefoot Series 10. Now, some of you, if you've been following me on my social media, as well as a few videos actually I've mentioned it in, this thing has been my new favourite thing ever. I did quite a risk and I bought this because it was £35 and I decided to get it with my birthday money because I decided why not, because it sounds brilliant. But yeah, I got into Jago and Litefoot when listening to the Last Adventure on the 6th Doctor box set and seeing Stage Fright. I loved that story. I then went on to see the other ones like Mahogany Murders, things like that. And then this thing came around and I've seen this, I've seen it at the festival and I didn't get it because of the download obviously, and yeah, now I finally have it and it's lovely and I just love it. So before we get on to the actual stories now, let's take a look at the product. Taking a look at the box now, as you can see, it looks great. The main promotional art is brilliant. Obviously, you have Jago and Litefoot there on the front, along with Crowther Summerton. And then we have a few of the characters and products and things from all 4 of the stories. And overall, it creates a really nice poster of the actual series. So at the front, we have Jago and Litefoot with investigators of infernal incidents, along with a few letters there from the 3rd story. Then we also have the beginning episode of all the genes and things around the end, and Jago and Litefoot, some explosions, how dramatic. A bat from the Year of the Bat. Then we have the Gasogene as well, and then we have in the middle from the worlds of Doctor Who. Along the top we have the Big Finish logo, as well as Christopher Benjamin and Trevor Baxter, of course, playing the main roles, Jago and Litefoot. Then at the bottom we have Series 10, and at the sides of the box we have Jago and Litefoot printed once again. Same applies for the top of the box. Bottom we have some company information, and then at the back of the box it is rather blank, but we do have 4 paragraphs on each of the individual stories, along with a few of the main credits at the top there. First disc is the case of the missing Gasogene. As you can see, overall the layout for Jago and Litefoot is actually quite simple, so we just have the logo in the middle with some sort of wooden effect in the background, along with the main image for this one being the Gasogene. Back we have more information about the actual story, and then on the inside we have the booklet and then the disc. Next disc we have the Year of the Bat. As you can see, this has been detailed well once again, but this time we have a bat in the middle with a clock there, and then the same information on the back, but this time for this story, and the same thing applies for the inside. The morning after is the same layout, but this time we have a really eerie hand coming out of a coffin, which is nice, along with the information at the bottom there with the title, more information on the back, and then the same on the inside along with vocal talent. So then we also have the disc once again with this really nice art on of the hand coming out of the coffin, which is nice. Then finally the series finale, we have the enemy of the final there, which I'm not going to say any more about, and then the title at the bottom there, the Museum of Curiosities. And then on the back we have more information there. And then this time we have the vocal talents, once again a few more credits along with the disc there, but as this is the series final, we do also open it to the back, as well as having the behind the scenes disc there, as well as an advertisement for Jago and Litefoot and Strax, which I also have and is a brilliant story. Something that I kind of expected in Jago and Litefoot was it to be a completely different format to Doctor Who, and that's what it was. The actual series itself was quite a lot different compared to their appearances in such episodes as Stage Fright and the other Big Finish range of the actual Doctor Who line, and I did actually feel that their characters were a little bit toned back, and I think that in the actual series themselves there are definitely a personality in there. I think both of them are quite consistent between Doctor Who and Jago and Litefoot, but I do think there is actually quite a big gap between the formatting of the stories. Really, all the writers on the series have actually been brilliant. I've loved every single episode, I'm going to say that now. I don't think any of the episodes on this box set are bad. I think they are all up there as brilliant stories, and I would actually recommend this probably over Series 9. I loved it that much. So the first episode is the case of the missing Gasogene. So technically this is actually my first ever proper Jago and Litefoot episode, because the other ones that I've listened to that are solely Jago and Litefoot are the companion chronicle called The Mahogany Murders, which was more of obviously a companion chronicle, so the episode was actually relived through the eyes of the 2 characters, so it wasn't really actually first person, it was more of the person sort of reflecting back on the adventure, I guess. But in this episode it was obviously much more present, and this definitely set up the series for me, and I just loved it. I think that there were a few parts in the episode that got me quite shocked. I did sort of know what to expect in places, but overall I did like it because it was a very nice sort of crime mystery. So this episode bases around quite a simple plot actually. It's quite sort of a simple murder mystery of having a murder in a locked room, so how can the person die? It's not suicide, and how is it in a locked room? Who obviously murdered him? Things like that. So it's actually quite a small stripped back plot, but the other additions that have been added to it have sort of padded out for the actual series itself. And there's just a few interesting parts in there as well. In this review, I'm not going to go into full depth of what actually happens in the story. Obviously, there's going to be some parts that I'm going to talk about quite pivotally because, hey, I can't do a review without sort of talking about the main parts. But overall, I'm going to actually leave that up to you guys to sort of see, because I think that saying everything, it just sort of ruins it. And I would like you guys to actually go and listen to it because I just love Jago and Litefoot. And if you do have the spare £35, I would highly recommend this box set. The episode itself is quite interesting because it sets up a character that I don't believe has been in Jago and Litefoot before, and that is Crothers Summerton. Now I always stumble on his first name. I can't say Crothers, I just can't say it. I give up already. But yeah, basically meets up with Jago and Litefoot, and in a way, he is sort of their biographer. He's basically wanting to write a book about Jago and Litefoot, and there's a really nice scene at the beginning where they're sort of waiting for him to arrive on time, and he arrives, and they have a bit of an argument about which name comes first, either Jago and Litefoot, and of course, with it being in the series itself, they call it Jago and Litefoot. So it's a nice bit of rivalry there between the two characters. I just love their comedic jokes and things like that. Crothers Summerton is played by Toby Haddock, or Haddock, I don't know how to pronounce his second name, but he is actually quite a familiar one to Doctor Who, not the actual show itself, but behind the scenes. I believe he's quite a frequent blogger in DWM. I do believe he has like a column every single month, maybe where he goes back and looks at Doctor Who episodes. I can't really remember, but I can remember him being in DWM quite a lot recently. And he was also at the Doctor Who Festival. He was the guy that did the Peter Capaldi panel with the cast and things. I believe that he also does the majority of the documentaries on the 2 Entertain classic DVDs that are sadly no longer being made due to the fact that they've released them all. But yeah, it's sort of nice to see him in this one because he plays an irritating character, and that works for me because I generally find myself being irritated by his character, which shows one thing: one, brilliant acting, and two, also brilliant writing as well, because I think that they've purposely made his character quite irritating because I want to get on the nerves of Jago and Litefoot, and then in that respect it also gets on the nerves of the viewer, or at least that's what I felt, and I think that just worked brilliantly. It didn't actually sort of hinder my enjoyment of the story. I just generally find myself disliking him, which is what sort of meant to happen, I think, because he's sort of a very annoying, chippy character, and to start with, for the very start of the series, considering it's been about 6 months for other views of Jago and Litefoot, it's nice to finally see Jago and Litefoot back, and as soon as we're back, we're having this character sort of chipping in constantly, and it does really feel like that. He's chipping in with the script, he's chipping in also with Jago and Litefoot's dialogue, which is, I know, something that I just wanted to sit back and sort of listen to Jago and Litefoot speak about some random junk. Honestly, they could talk about anything and I would find it interesting, probably. I generally find that quite a good plot because I found it an interesting idea, and basically sort of stayed with Jago and Litefoot throughout the whole episode, sort of writing down things for his book. They both have different ideas of how sort of the mystery has happened. Jago's going down a very magical end. I believe he starts talking about a genie and this gasogene and things, and how sort of a gas monster could have killed him. And then Litefoot's going down the much more logical end, as usual, of sort of being someone who cuts up bodies and sort of identifies things. I can't remember what it's called, but you know, he's sort of like Molly from Sherlock. But yeah, he's basically one of them, so he goes down the much more logical route, and that causes both of them to split off and sort of go on their own investigation. And then throughout the episode, Crothers Summerton sort of goes and jumps between the two in a way, which I think sort of allows for them to have different screen time and things, which is brilliant. And yeah, I think that works rather well. I think the interesting thing with Jago and Litefoot as well is the fact that they can actually slip in things that the Doctor Who line never normally does. Like, for example, in the first episode, about 10 minutes in, somebody's coming onto somebody in a bush in the middle of a garden. Also introduced to a new character, which I'm going to need to look at the CD for because I'm terrible with names, as you probably know. Sir Hartley Harcourt. Now he obviously is sort of the owner of this manor, which he's sort of responsible for the person who died because that was one of his manservants, which basically he's one of his manservant people, which is what people have in Victorian times. And yeah, he's quite an interesting character because, to be quite honest, he's a bit of a mad person because he's invented a train, and I believe he calls it the house train, and that is exactly what it says on the tin. So literally a steam train in the house, and that provides for a rather funny scene between Jago, Litefoot and Harcourt, where they come around the corner and there's just this massive train there and tons of smoke, and it is quite amusing actually. To about 20 minutes before the end of the story, we get introduced to a rather interesting plot. I'm actually quite surprised to see for Victorian times it is a very adapted plot, and it is the idea of scientific evolution. And basically we have this person who is thinking up ways to sort of develop and speed up evolution, and that definitely doesn't happen to Jago or anything, and he doesn't turn hairy or anything like that at all and start grunting and going weird. The next episode is The Year of the Bat. Now this one is quite honestly the most unusual thing that I honestly didn't expect ever. I just don't understand. Even now, I don't understand half of this story. I just find it such a great listen. This episode is written by Jonathan Morris, and it is a very, very interesting plot. I think it is rather new series, an idea that I find myself being really intrigued with to start with straight away, and it's basically the idea of this yesterday box. The opening part of the episode is Jago, Litefoot, and Ellie sat in sort of, I believe, Litefoot's house, and it's nice to sort of see them just sort of relaxed, not doing any mysteries for once, so it's nice to sort of have the opening to that. And this box gets delivered, this tea chest, to Litefoot's house, and he's rather intrigued to what it is. They open it and it turns out it is a yesterday box. And there's a letter inside from L. Now basically, this yesterday box is able to contact the past. In this episode we have quite an interesting plot where quite a lot of it is not actually focused on Jago and Litefoot in the present time of Victorian times, and it's actually set 30 years in the past when they're sort of only just growing up in a way to sort of be what they became. So Jago is just starting out in the theatre industry, and Litefoot is he's studying, I do believe, in a university. So yeah, it's nice to sort of go back and actually see this in this episode. I think it's quite a personal story. What they need to do to solve this 30-year-old mystery is contact their past selves. And kicks off sort of mainly is when Jago is working in the theatre, and one of the orphan children is stolen. One of the nanny people. Jago then spots this person. She then runs off but accidentally drops a calling card. He then goes to the place where the calling card has, which is basically sort of today's equivalent of a business card, and it's got the address on, so he goes there and then says that this person's stolen one of the orphans from the theatre, and it turns out it's a trap. When the nanny is spotted sort of stealing one of the children, it's instructed to drop one of the calling cards, so the person who's seen it goes to the place and then therefore gets killed pretty much. So Jago then goes to this place and he gets locked up in a bell tower. I do believe it's Big Ben. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Big Ben. I can't really remember. It was a few weeks ago that I listened to it now. And basically, that's when I start getting confused, because as well as Litefoot having his own investigation where he's sort of studying in Elephant and Castle, which is where I stayed in London, which I found rather ironic because I was listening to this and he just said Elephant and Castle, and I was like, interesting little reference there, and a rather weird little coincidence. And all of a sudden, halfway through the story, I started to realise, hang on, why is this called the Year of the Bat? And then that's when it all happened. It turns out the nanny people are actually bat people. It's a bit like the Krillitanes, and the sound effects that they use for them are very Krillatane-esque, so I don't know if there's sort of like an alien Krillatane, sort of a cousin or something, a bit like the Sensorites to the Ood, I don't know. Nanny is flying through the sky with the little child, and then she drops them in the bell tower. But why would they want all of these children and Jago in this bell tower? And that is to feed the mother bat. So basically they're going to use children for food, which once again I don't think you would really see that in Doctor Who, which we have this really interesting scene where Jago is reliving it in the future to Litefoot, because obviously they're solving the mystery together, and it leads to a very interesting scene of Jago trying to describe what happened, and he starts getting very confused, and he starts saying how one of the bats went up to the mother bat and started, well, he sort of started going, and suckled. That's very memeable now, isn't it? And then Litefoot has a thing where he starts saying, have you mixed your metaphors, Litefoot? I cracked up. I absolutely cracked up at that. It may not have even been funny. I just cracked up, I will admit. What I do like about this episode is it's a different setting to the others. One that's actually set in the past, and in the present Victorian times it's actually just set in Litefoot's house. And I'm not going to say much about what happens at the end because I think that's sort of going to ruin it. But yeah, I do like that setting. From the Victorian street setting, like the theatre and the Red Tavern pub where they normally go to quite a lot. I thought it absence of Inspector Quick as well for this one, which I don't mind. I don't mind Inspector Quick not being in this one. He is in the other three. So, and then the next one, The Morning After. Now I love this story as well. To talk about this episode, I actually need to talk about the plot in quite some depth in a way, I do think, and some parts I'm going to cover are technically spoilers in a way, but I don't find myself being able to say about the episode in any other way. And basically, this episode opens at Jago's funeral. Honestly, as soon as it opened, we had sort of like the zoom. I could sort of imagine it in my mind, I guess. Sort of the zoom in, sort of the church bells, and Litefoot and Ellie are at the funeral of Jago, and they're just sort of. It's got to the point where they're just sort of lowering the coffin, I do believe, into the ground and throwing the soil over it. And yes, it's very, very shocking to start with. This episode actually plays on a fear, or at least it does to start with, and I know it's actually, funny enough, something that a lot of people have a fear of, and it is being buried alive. And that is what we have just before the title sequence airs. It sounded sort of rather popped sound of soil being dropped on the coffin, as if it was from inside the coffin, and all of a sudden you just heard Jago say, "Oh, corks," which is his catchphrase quite worriedly, and then the theme tune just cracks in, and he's been buried alive, which I think is a rather shocking thing to have, and rather gruesome as well, and I just love the idea of it, because I generally felt for the character, and it got me straight away. What I love about this episode as well, it's obviously a play on words. It's not called the morning after, it's called the morning after, which that doesn't make sense at all, but in mourning, as in sort of being sad and mourning after a funeral, so I just love that little sort of play on words there. Jago wakes up in the future, and there's sort of this society called the Jago and Litefoot Appreciation Society, and the world's sort of being attacked by a zombie apocalypse, which I know a few people will probably be intrigued by that for such things as The Walking Dead, and I do believe they actually call them the Walkers in this as well, so I do believe it's set in 2012, I can't really remember. It goes on in the future, and towards the end of the story there's a few references to Crothers Somerton, as it says that without the books of Crothers Somerton, we wouldn't know about the Jago and Litefoot Society and all that, and there's a few gaps missing and things, and interestingly there's a scene where she wants to know a little bit more to sort of fill the gaps, and it cuts back to Litefoot, cuts back to Jago again, it ends with sort of Jago saying, and that is how we solve the mystery of Jack the Ripper again. And so obviously that may be something that we may cover in the future, I don't know. The Ripper does make an appearance in Jago and Litefoot, how exciting. I love this episode because it feels very personal to Litefoot as well, because obviously Litefoot needs to deal with this investigation pretty much whilst Jago's literally just been buried, because whilst he's sort of walking around the cemetery area, Inspector Quick comes over and says that we have a new case about sort of this body thing of people waking up. I felt sympathy for Litefoot. I think that's how brilliantly it was written. I felt sympathy for him. I think just him dealing with it. And what was nice for this episode as well is we had the return of a character. Now I do believe that he was a character in an episode in series 8 or 9. I can't really recall because I haven't actually seen the other series. We have the return of Dr. Luke Betterman. Now he's a similar character. I don't really know much about him because I'm guessing he had a lot of development in his first few stories. But basically he's set up for the murder of Jago because in the episode Jago is in fact shot. That is how he dies in sort of, I do believe, a week previous, which we don't actually see in the episode. And yeah, it is looking very much like he is a part of it because he's just arrived, but something that he has is sort of a week old newspaper, and it is very intriguing, and I think that it's a very interesting plot because the twist that comes after this sort of shows how you can get a bit misled in places, but I'm not going to say any more about that. I think this reminds me of very much quite a toned back episode because we have Litefoot there trying to cope with Jago and things, and it's just, I love this story. I think it's honestly, I can't really rank them in my mind because I love all 4 episodes in this box set, but I just think that the Year of the Bat is quite a special one because I think it's rather interesting, and then we have this one as well, where I definitely think that these 2 middle ones are definitely 2 very, very solid stories. Compared to episodes 1 and 4, I think that these 2 in the middle are just sort of proper 10 out of 10 faultless stories, but the other ones do have some things that could be improved in places, but I still feel that they're absolutely brilliant. Then we have the final of the series, the Museum of Curiosities. Now this is one episode that I honestly didn't know what to expect from it, and it doesn't really reveal too much on the back either, which is what I like about this one. Quite honestly, it is a very interesting title. Obviously the Museum of Curiosities is quite an interesting one. This was written by Justin Richards. I think that you can guess this episode features the return of Crothers Somerton once again, after him having a few references throughout the series. We have this one. Now previously when we last had their meet up, at the very end of the case of the missing Gasogene, Jago and Litefoot leave him alone because they're sort of, to be honest, they're fed up, and basically the case ends and Litefoot says, oh well, we will be looking forward to seeing the book, and then it just starts to walk off, and then what is really nice is in that scene we have them sort of going, yes, he was nice, like, but he's a bit irritating though, and I just love that scene. And it says what will happen if he turns up again. Litefoot jokingly says, I will change the locks and possibly my address, because he is a very stalkerish character, and in this episode we have that stretched to the max because he is a stalker, and he is in this episode for quite a big part of it, and yeah, very intriguing story. An interesting cast separation for this one because we have Litefoot with Crothers Somerton in occasions, Jago with Crothers Somerton in occasions. Then we have sort of like a new group, which is Ellie and Luke Betterman as well, which is sort of like a new pairing, which I did really like them in this actually. Obviously Ellie is a very recurring character in Jago and Litefoot. I do occasionally get to grow on Ellie. I just love her character. I think she's brilliant. She's big friends with Jago and Litefoot. And it's nice because in this episode, Dr. Luke Betterman and Ellie actually come across the main part of the mystery before Jago and Litefoot do. Just again, I think that the actual twist for this episode for Crothers Somerton to sort of be playing not all what he seems is quite I think that you could see it coming, or at least I could, because he's just a too creepy character just to be a fan, if you get what I mean. He's a really over attached stalkery person, and he's just creepy, but acted brilliantly. So this episode is very much sort of, with it being the final episode of the 10th series, it is a rather round number, and I wanted to sort of celebrate that, and that is how we have the museum in now, which is something that I think is once again a very interesting but new series style of Doctor Who idea. And the museum is basically a museum of all little things from Jago and Litefoot's past adventures. And I can remember listening to the behind the scenes, and what they loved about that is because they could say, oh, that's there, that's there. They didn't want to overcrowd it though, but with it being audio, they don't need to make anything. So I do actually believe even Mr. Sin may have been in there from the Talons of Wang Chiang. I don't know though, but we had a few references nevertheless to Talons of Wang Chiang in this museum. And of course, if you are a devoted Jago and Litefoot fan, that hopefully I will be one day, I'll be getting more series after this for sure. And we have a few little references in there. We have the Mahogany Murders, which is the first ever case, the Companion Chronicle one. We have the Talons of Wang Chiang. We have some dolls from, I do believe, Series 8. I can't really recall them though. And then we have a few other things as well. I do believe even the Gasogene may have been in there for quite a recent one. And I just love the idea. It basically collected things from their past, which is rather a creepy concept that he's done. And the final things that he is missing from his collection are Jago and Litefoot themselves. And that's what he wants to have. He wants to have them preserved in wax as a statue. He's creepy. Once again, I sort of feel sorry for Luke Betterman in this story, because once again, he is set up to be the bad character. Throughout the episode, we actually have a scene that I fall for, because Luke Betterman and Ellie stumble across a dead body in the episode, and just before the scene cuts, Betterman says, oh Ellie, I really hope you didn't see that, quite eerily, and then it just cuts back to Litefoot. I don't believe we return to them for another 10 minutes at least, and it is a rather negative impact, because you feel like, right, he is definitely the person who is to blame here, but it turns out it's just a coincidence that he's there. 2 episodes in a row, he's been set up as the main villain for the story, and it's quite sort of all the fingers pointing to him. It turns out not. It turns out it's just a coincidence, and when we return to them eventually, we actually have him sort of saying, because it's a dead body, I didn't want you to see that, because obviously in that times you were a woman, you know, and I don't want you to see these things. And I think that is played extremely well, and I think the writing there is very clever. And then eventually Crothers Somerton is defeated, which I will leave up to you to see how that happens, but basically think about the 2 factors that I previously said about Jago Litefoot and what he wants to do to them. The episode ends with the duo in the Red Tavern, as usual, having a bit of a drink, which is a really nice relaxed scene. We have Inspector Quick in there as well. I do believe Luke Betterman is in there, but Inspector Quick is drawn away from the scene by one of his sort of investigative policemen. Spoiler alert now, because if you are a Jago and Litefoot viewer and you don't want the actual ending for the series to be ruined, turn off this video now or skip forward 3 minutes or something like that. Bigfoot just continues his conversation with Ellie, and he walks off, has this little conversation. It turns out there is a new mystery. So Inspector Quick goes off, and this is the very end of the episode, and there's this person under this archway. He's wanting to speak to somebody in authority. So Inspector Quick goes over, and then he says, what are you doing here? And we just have this really eerie laugh. And then he goes, who are you? And then we have this gap. And then he just says, I am the master, and you will obey me. Actually, I was drinking, and I nearly choked on my own tea because I was that shocked, not even going to lie. Yeah. And then the theme tune just goes, and that is the end of it. And that's not fair. And the reason why I'm filming this review right now is because this morning, literally as soon as I woke up, I turned on my phone, and the first thing that I seen was the cover art for Series 11. And bloody hell, it's got Colin in, it's got Jago and Litefoot in, and they look brilliant, and it's got the Master on the front, and just, literally can't, I need it now. In fact, I have to release the trailer. I've not actually been on the website. Have they actually released the trailer? Jago Litefoot Series 10, and wow, honestly, if you like Jago Litefoot in the actual series and Doctor Who, I would highly recommend this, like a lot. I would recommend it more than the War Doctor box set. I'd recommend it more than Doom Coalition. I would recommend it more than any of the recent Doctor Who releases ever. I love it to pieces. It's brilliant. I just found out that Series 11 is coming out in April, and 12 is scheduled for October as well. So that is a whole new 6 episodes for this year. And the next series has the Master in, and it looks bloody amazing. And it's got bloody Colin in, and I can't wait, and Colin's new costume as well looks brilliant. So yeah, I would highly recommend Jago Litefoot. I can't recommend it more than enough. And that's that. So thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a big like, and please subscribe if you're not already. If any questions, please do leave them below, and I'll be sure to answer them at some point in the near future. Thanks again for watching, and I shall see you all next time. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.